Oh, I think it's working. There we go. Yay. The little line is okay. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. We are live. Yeah. Hi,
Finally.
Stephanie. Hey, everybody. I have Stephanie Zikmann with me. I'm so excited. Stephanie's coming. She's logging in from Scotland, and Stephanie is a holistic dog groomer, and she has created an amazing program so that dogs, our dogs need to be groomed, they need to be bathed, their nails need to be trimmed, and all of that. And sometimes it can be a really stressful experience for the dog, but Stephanie has developed a system to make it easy on the dogs, to make it pleasant for them, and so forth. And so, what we're going to talk about today, Stephanie, if it's okay with you, is I'd like to go into this whole area of getting the dog's consent in
Yeah.
order to, because if we go in for some kind of medical procedure, we give our consent. Nobody just grabs us and restrains us and forces us without telling
Doesn't
us
matter.
what's going on, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, and so it makes no sense when we do that to our dogs. And I think we do it just out of convenience or whatever. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about what we can do instead, because I think that would help a lot of people.
I think as well when you tapped into convenience, a lot of the time I think dogs are just expected to dislike the grooming process. So we're naturally programmed not to question it when they do appear to be quite stressed out when they are getting groomed. So it's something that's became a normality to us by default, whether we're professional or dog parents. So consent is all about, like you say, trying to work through the process of grooming in a kind of more bespoke way for the dog. So we're looking at how can we make sure that that dog has given consent when they're getting groomed. And we do that through the likes of cooperative based methods, and that's what my accreditation tries to teach professional groomers to do. So trying to implement more kind of positive training into the context of a professional grooming environment. So it's really, really interesting. And it also makes the process so much more fun as well because you're getting to bond with the dogs better, as well as get a far safer environment at the same time. So yeah, that's what we kind of do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Safer in the sense that the dogs feel safe, right? Because
yeah.
they, obviously, the process itself from the human end, we're cautious about safety. We don't want to put the dogs in danger, but the dogs need to feel safe too. So what are some practical tips that people can follow in order to be more aware of of how their dogs are feeling about the whole process?
I think just having to take a step back and actually look at your dog and see what kind of signals he's giving off to kind of tell you whether or not he is enjoying the process or if he's maybe perhaps struggling. And then you try and come to understanding why your dog is struggling in the first place. Is it the fact that he's fearful of the grooming table? Is he fearful of the clipper? Is he fearful of the sound of the clipper? And when we have an indication of where that fear is coming from, we can then start to introduce that stimuli in a more positive way, so that we can gradually desensitize the dog then to being in the presence of a certain object or sound or, even process as well collectively together, just breaking it down into more manageable chunks, no pun intended, so that eventually your dog is more cooperative within the grooming environment. But if you look at it as well, grooming is quite similar an environment to your veterinary practice. So if your dog has a fear of the vets, the chances are they're going to have a fear of the grooming environment. It's very similar. There is a lot of objects that could probably look quite similar to that and your vet's practice as well. So being mindful of that. So if your dog does have, the tendency to kind of freak out during a routine vet trip, for example, the chances are they're going to struggle in the groomers as well. So that is a telltale sign, sorry. Um, but again, starting your puppy or your dog early with grooming as well and getting them used to even basic grooming tasks in a positive and fun way rather than just throwing them in the deep end and expecting them to know that it's safe. there's a misconception in the grooming environment of what safety actually means. So if we're coming from the kind of context of a professional grooming environment, many people assume that safety is having control of the dog at all times. So if the dog is in control and he cannot jump off a table, for example, then we've achieved safety. But what we try and teach in the academy is that if we look at it from a dog's perspective, taking control of a dog is not necessarily keeping the dog safe. We're stripping him of his need to express naturally, and we're also stripping him from the kind of security of the room as well, so he doesn't feel safe in that environment. And that's when we start to see that escalation of behaviour, what is deemed aggressive or reactive. It's just a dog that's fearful because he has no control of his own environment. So it's coming away from the idea that physical restraints within the context of grooming is safety and looking at it from an emotional security sense. How will that dog feel
Mhm.
safe? In which case that then makes the environment safer as well.
Yeah, it's kind of a counterintuitive in the sense that if you prepare the dog well enough, less restraint is really safer for the dog.
Yes.
Um,
Uh-huh.
because the dog feels safe, and dogs that are restrained and feeling scared and panicky are going to be looking for a way to escape.
Yeah.
But if a dog is comfortable in the environment, if you've kind of taken the time, going back to that whole idea of convenience, a lot of times people just want to get it done. You know,
Yes.
just let's just hurry up and get it done. And when from the human point of view, when they get it done, they say, okay, that's over with. But the dog is dealing with the stress of that experience
For
long
days.
after it's
Yeah.
over.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
have to also like be able to identify that as well, because I think we kind of disconnect from that stressful ordeal. So we can maybe as dog parents build ourselves up to that session at the groomers. We go, oh my goodness, Bruno absolutely hates the groomers. Now it's done. Thank goodness that's me. I can put it aside for a month. But they forget that obviously dogs do take time to come back down to that parasympathetic state, and they go off and they do something else that's high stress, and then that adds and it snowballs. Everything's connected, and it's again trying to be more aware of the fact that every stressful event is contributing to how happy and healthy your dog is as well. So if you're jumping into one stressful event after another, then you're going to have a lot, more advanced, cases of behavioral issues, and you're also going to have more kind of chronic illnesses and diseases as well long term. So it's kind of looking at everything, holistically, the bigger picture.
Mhm.
Grooming isn't just one isolated session. It's something that happens frequently in that dog's life. So it's worth your time investing the time initially in having that process introduced the right way, and also being aware of any other events before and after a grooming session are also significant, especially if your dog has had a particularly stressful time at the groomers that one session.
Mhm. Yeah, that's such a good point to make for people that a stressful experience with grooming, for example, doesn't just end from the dog's emotional state when the grooming is finished. And they
Yeah,
can carry that stress over, and then something else happens that's stacked
yeah,
on top of that.
yeah,
And then maybe hours later, the dog might just blow up. And we think, well, where did that come from?
yeah,
Why is the dog doing that? And we have to think that we all have our limits. And we've all, I think, been in that situation where, things have just piled up and we're ready to blow up. So, and if that happens with the dogs, we have to think how many difficult experiences has the dog had without time to recover in between.
yeah.
So, yeah.
I think
So
it's really important. Yeah.
yeah. So what can people do, whether they groom their dogs themselves or whether they go to a professional groomer? How can they protect their dogs from that kind of stress?
I think just forward planning, first of all, so being very intentional with your grooming sessions. So looking at your week and deciding which day of the week you're going to dedicate some time to grooming and making sure that you're avoiding any high stress events that week, and maybe, you know, even longer. It depends. Every dog's different as well. Some dogs can bounce back quite quickly, whether they're maybe a wee bit more resilient and confident, while other dogs might take quite a bit longer. So it's just being able to know your own dog as well. But trying to avoid things like vet trips, or, you know, if they go to a doggy daycare centre, maybe having that postponed for a few days just until they get to decompress after a trip to the groomers. But if you're doing it at home, and I think this is what I'll talk about in the webinar that I've got for you all lined up, is that grooming at home shouldn't really be stressful anyway. And if we can try and embrace grooming as it was naturally intended, it's meant to be a bonding opportunity and a really therapeutic thing. So hopefully if you're doing it right at home, then it's not going to be something that your dog doesn't enjoy. It's going to be something that you both enjoy equally. And it has so many wonderful benefits, but we won't go into that today because obviously I'm talking about that more in depth. But it's just about forward planning. I think that's the main kind of the big thing that the people fail to do.
Yeah. So if someone has, you mentioned earlier about making it positive right from the beginning, from the time they're little puppies. So
Yeah.
what are some tips about getting puppies acclimated to the grooming process? Some of them need a lot more intensive grooming than others, but just, what are some of the things that if someone has a young puppy that they can do that makes grooming pleasant for their
They
dog?
can start small. So obviously we're being aware of the limitations of a puppy as well in terms of attention span. So starting like with very small basic grooming tasks and introducing them in a really fun way. So we can do that while combining our kind of typical training exercises that we do with puppies. So we can try and start introducing them to the likes of a chin rest. Sorry, my little puppy here, actually, she's adolescent. She's jumping about making lots of noise right now, so I apologise. Like that, what are you
Can't,
doing?
can't hear her, that's fine.
But yeah, so starting small, maybe starting with very basic tasks, things that you maybe won't consider doing. Like we're so kind of programmed to do sit, stay, things like that, you know, your typical training exercises, but looking more into cooperative based ones. So while they're still young and they're really willing to work for food and things, teaching them bucket game, teaching them chin rest, place is a good one. So getting them used to standing on a mat, for example, and then introducing some light touch, light strokes, just very, very basic stuff. But it's just getting them into the habit of that physical contact and having that association being positive as well. Because obviously, as groomers, we are very much physical based, we are very much touch based. And in order to do our job safely, we have to be able to handle dogs in, you know, areas they probably wouldn't like any other way. You know, it's important to introduce it positively. So
Yeah.
yeah, make it fun.
Yeah. And,
Yeah,
just to clarify, in case anybody doesn't recognize chin rest and bucket game, those are ways for dogs to give consent.
yeah,
Because the chin rest, the dog will place his chin on a surface,
yeah,
and as long as he's resting his chin there, he's okay. But if he takes his chin up, that means I need a minute.
yeah,
Let's just wait. And it creates, Stephanie, you mentioned earlier that this approach to grooming creates a bond, a beautiful bond between the dog and the person, because you're listening to what the dog is telling you. You're not just dismissing it and moving on and just plowing through the process without being attentive to the dog's needs. So I think that, that's lovely. And the bucket game is similar, and you guys can,
look
all
it
look
up.
at
Yeah, there's so
it. Yeah.
many examples.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean it's bonding should sorry, grooming shouldn't be something that you don't look forward to. It should be something that we're all excited about. And we should all embrace it. And I think again with puppies, one of the biggest things, the biggest issues that we have as a groomer, speaking to hundreds of different dog carers, is the nails. Again, having puppies used to having their paws handled really young can make all of the difference. So what I'll do a lot with my dogs is if they're lying in my lap, for example, I'll just have a very gentle play around with their feet. And you
Mhm.
can introduce that in a positive way. Sometimes praise is enough, that they find that rewarding enough, but you can also have something of high value just to feed at the same time. And it's just getting that association with having their paws handled with something of high value, liver paste, or if you want to use a lick mat or something, just to start getting that programmed in the head that, okay, do you know what? Having my feet touched isn't so bad after all. It's actually quite a nice thing. And then that just sets you up so much. It's putting down those solid foundations. Um,
Mhm.
the next thing you would need to do is start looking at which groomer you're going to use if you are choosing to use one professionally. And then look at starting to introduce that groomer to your puppy quite early on so that they are familiar with that person. I
Mhm.
think a lot of the time people just rush in and they go, do you know what? There's a groomer down the street. I'll book Bruno in when he's 6 months and it'll be fine. But we forget that that puppy phase is no longer there anymore. He's now adolescent, and there's so much more issues now we're having to deal with. Having them in early enough, basically, as soon as they're safe enough to go outdoors, I would be looking at my groomer. I'd be looking at getting my puppy in just to visit informal sessions where they can just have a wee look around the environment, very laid back, maybe some ACE-free work if you've heard of that. I know you have, Marilyn.
Yeah.
So we work within the professional grooming setting is night and day as well. It's just getting that puppy used to the environment without any kind of expectation on them.
Mhm.
Just building up that puppy's confidence. And it's the same with any dog as well. It doesn't matter what age they are.
Mhm.
You would work that the same way as well.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and can you give people um just a few general tips of what to look for in a professional groomer to make sure that that your dog feels safe and emotionally secure during the process?
I think the biggest advice I could give you, the best advice is to follow your gut when it comes to the groomer.
Mhm.
I would say that it's
Good
an
advice.
unregulated industry. It is follow your gut. I think you always know yourself if a person's right. But equally, if you're looking for anything to ask your groomer, I think it's really important that you feel safe enough to ask your groomer questions. How do you operate? Do you use physical restraints? Have you invested in learning more about canine behavior? I would want to know that as a dog groomer, or sorry, as a dog carer, because ultimately how much you know about a dog really says a lot as well. So I would be looking for a groomer who invests in their CPD and actively goes out and learns more.
Mhm.
I don't think that qualification is enough for competence, to be quite honest. As you know, science changes as well, so we really want to be up to date with our certifications and things like that. Um, it really just depends on your dog because if your dog is quite a confident dog and is quite good with other dogs, you might be okay with a multi-grooming environment. But
Mhm.
a lot of the dogs that I see are dogs that maybe don't cope well under really high stress environments and they need that one-to-one groomer. And it's absolutely okay to look for a one-to-one groomer for your dog if that's what your dog needs. I find it's far easier to do what I do when you're one-to-one
Mhm.
because there's a lot less triggers then. There's a lot less environmental stressors there. But certainly I would just be following your gut, seeing, what do they have behind them? Like, do they have certifications? Do they have qualifications? Do they have insurances? Because it is an unregulated industry and you really need to be careful. And also, the big topic is ask if you're allowed to stay present for the groom as well, even just the first couple of sessions, because having that insight to what goes on behind the scenes is not only great for your education because you're getting to see things and ask questions and learn technique so that you can then
Mhm.
follow that at home. But you get
Mhm.
to see how the groomer works with your dog, and I think that's really important. You'll be able to identify if there is a lot of consent and cooperative methods in that practice. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice. To actually be present and see how the process works. And also, I love the first bit of advice you gave, which is follow your gut. if you get a sense that something isn't right, or you're uncomfortable with something the person says or does, then you need to listen to that.
Yeah.
That's great advice.
Oh, they're your babies at the end of the day, aren't they? And you would treat them just like children. And oh, I watched a fascinating interview actually with Andrew Hale, and it was a lady who was a child psychologist, and she was from a dog carer's perspective, actually telling us how she feels when she looks at dogs and how much they are very similar. A relationship between a dog and a dog carer as there is with a child and their parent. And she talks about secure base. And I think that when it comes to dogs within a grooming environment, having the dog carer present gives them that secure base where they feel safer because they have their parent there or their carer there to support them through this stressful experience. So it's a benefit to everyone having dog carer there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the dog looks to their parent. I think of it as a parenting relationship. And there's more and more science to show that there's validity to that, which makes me really
Yeah.
happy
Yeah.
because because um, that whole notion had been dismissed for so long. Is there, they're not human children, that, the parenting is, that's like anthropomorphizing and all of that. But the relationship we have to care for our dogs, based on what we're learning about how dogs emotions and how their mental processing works, we know that there's so much overlap between how humans process and how dogs do. So, they need to know that they can trust us.
Yeah.
And that's one of the criteria for a parent, right?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
the child knows that no matter what, my parent is the one I can always fall back on. They've always got my back, no matter what happens, they'll be there for me. And that's what we need to convey to our dogs. And so that whole, idea of, and if that's how, you feel about the dog in your life, then your intuition, and I don't care if you're a man or a woman, your intuition is going to tell you, you're going to get that gut feeling, wait a minute, something sounds a little off to me. And Stephanie, I love your advice. Don't ignore that feeling. If you get a gut feeling, something isn't right, listen to it. And if you have to walk away, then walk away.
I think it's also important to realize because I've had a couple of dogs and over the years that are just not the right fit for me. And my
Mhm.
process can be perfect. It could be so dog centric, but yet there'll be something that's just it's an incompatibility.
Mhm.
So it might not even be something that the groomer is doing wrong. It might just be it's a case of it's incompatibility. And I think what's interesting with the dog that I'm referring to is it was a Romanian rescue actually. He was a Romanian rescue. And I suspect there must have been some form of abuse with someone maybe that looked like me. You never know. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, how dogs process and how they think and how they remember things, but it's the only thing I can think of. But just being aware as well that sometimes it might not be the right fit, but for other reasons as well, just being aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, we see that all the time, that, a dog will meet one person and be immediately attracted to that person, even though it's a stranger, and then might meet someone else and be indifferent or try to
Yeah.
avoid that person. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the person. It just means that for some reason the dog senses we're not
Yeah.
going to connect, and
Yeah.
they just avoid it. So, yeah. Yes, so these points are so important for keeping our dogs feeling safe and secure, because dogs that feel insecure in one area, it's going to carry over to others. So, yeah, so this is really important. And grooming is something that all dogs need. So you do such a valuable service in conveying this information to people, Stephanie. So I'm so excited about the talk that you're going to give, and you have actually gone above and beyond, and you have recorded something in advance for everybody. So I am so excited about that. We're going to talk about safety again, which is critical for our dogs. And Stephanie's talk is going to be next Saturday, the 17th. So get ready. Make sure you're ready.
Yeah,
And
all the questions I'll
yeah,
be here to answer.
yeah.
Yeah.
This I'm so excited about the topic of this summit. I intentionally scheduled it around Valentine's Day because we need to really understand what it means to put our love for our dogs in action. You know, we can say the words, but unless we take action and really do the things to let our dogs know that they can trust us, that our love is there for them, then, the words are empty. So I'm so excited about this. We have such an amazing panel of dog
Yeah.
people. And I'm just beyond excited about it.
No,
So,
thank you so much for asking me to come on again and
yeah,
for you.
yeah. Well, you have, Stephanie, you have such a valuable message for people because I think that grooming dogs is sometimes passed off as just one of those necessary things, and they don't take a minute to understand how the dog is feeling about it. And that is so important to get their consent, to make sure that they feel emotionally safe. It takes a little more time to do that. We have to be a little more intentional, but if we love them, then that's part of it. We don't mind that. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Steph,
Oh,
thank you. Thank you so
thank
much
you.
for doing this live.
No,
And
you're
if
welcome.
anyone, let me just double check, um, just see if anyone has. No, I don't see any questions on Facebook. So if anyone watches this or watches the recording later on and you have a question, you can put it in the comments on Facebook, and I will make sure that Stephanie sees them and I know that she'll answer you.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I'll
So,
wait for FaceTime.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I'll just make sure that as many people as possible get a chance to view this video because your message is so important for
Thank
dog
you.
people.
Thank
So,
you very much,
yeah.
Madeline.
Yeah, so excited to see you. And I'm going
Okay.
to end the live stream and I have to end the whole meeting in order to end the live stream. So bye.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Have a great